Oh, there we go.
Let me get on there and I'll share a viewing party or something.
Yeah, we got to figure out exactly how to do this.
Says you've been live for 2 minutes.
I hadn't been.
Let's see.
It is taking some time.
All right. Well, I'm sharing it now. You got 10 people watching it as we speak.
It's like froze up on me. So if anybody watching this and it's working, hello. You're in the pre-game show. Okay, here we go.
It's the first time we've dealt with this shared technology, folks, and we're both excited to present and talk about some of our stuff. But this is there's obviously going to be some technical issues that we'll have to work through here periodically, and we don't have an IT department yet.
Okay, mine is working now. There we go. Oh, we got a few people in here.
It's the first time we've dealt with this shared technology, folks. We're both excited to present. All right, turn my phone off.
All right.
That background music.
I got my everything muted except, can everybody still hear me talking right now? Because I can't hear myself. This delay thing is, like I said, still messing with me.
Sure. Oh, we just got, it's not even quite 7 yet. And we said we go hot somewhere right around 7 or just afterwards, making sure that we get accustomed to this technology.
So I'm looking at the people I can invite. Oh, never mind. Those people in here or what? I've obviously never done this.
Greg, I on my end, I see there's at least there's a dozen people in there checking it out.
All right. I wish some people would comment so I could see that they were there.
First comment up for me.
Yeah, I see nothing. Oh, there we go. That is
my watch party.
That is my sister-in-law. So I assume that her and my brother are watching. And there's Sandy Lyles, someone I know from Southeast Texas Snake ID and other Snake ID groups. Great. Okay. So, as presumably everybody who's watching knows, I am Greg Hall, the Habitat and Stewardship Coordinator for the Coastal Heritage Preserve. I'm here with my good friend Romy Swanson, who will introduce himself in a moment. So today we're going to cover a couple of our favorite herping and birding spots and just take general questions either about those things or other things that you want to ask us about. We don't have a real clear script or anything that we're going to go by. This is really an experiment to kind of see what we're going to do going forward. So I do animal outreach talks for various organizations like Audubon Turn, Texas Master Naturalist, Scouts of America, different groups like that. And like I said, also work in conservation, actually in land management and education for Artist Boat, a small nonprofit here in Galveston. I've been working in conservation for over 2 years. Romy, much longer than me. But I've always been kind of a weekend warrior when it came to volunteering for different things, doing presentations. So it took me a little longer to get to the career I'm in now, but I got there with much encouragement from people like Romy and my wonderful fiance, Laura, who allowed me to basically quit the job I had, get another job I didn't want, while I tried to find a conservation job in Galveston. So that happened, all that happened, and here I am. So with that, I'm gonna let Romy introduce himself.
Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Romy Swanson, and some of you probably, many of you probably know me. We're probably friends. If we're not, you may recognize me, but right now I don't have my typical beard. I'm a little baby faced. That's thrown some folks off. So I'm currently the director of conservation strategy with Audubon, Texas, which is the division of the National Audubon Society. I'm the chief conservation director, is one way to think about it, for the state of Texas. And I just put a little disclaimer out here right now. Any views or opinions I offer tonight are not reflective of my employer. They are mine and mine alone. Just to get that clarity out there.
Ditto.
And I'm sure Greg would like to provide the same disclaimer. With Audubon, I'm in addition to being the lead conservation officer for the state of Texas, I also serve as liaison with some of our international initiatives with Mexico, and also I participate within some of the landscape and regional or even continental scale initiatives within Audubon. So Texas always has a big seat at the table whenever you're talking about central flyway issues or Gulf Coast issues. Before that, I worked with the Hill Country Conservancy here in Central Texas. It's a land trust that works to conserve forever large tracts of land under private ownership, so that they remain operating as ranches and farms and family properties, and providing all of the great ecosystem services and benefits to the public that sort of arrangement has. And then prior to that, I was a private lands consulting wildlife biologist with Plateau Land and Wildlife. So I've been working within conservation for over a decade. And but I have always been a nerd naturalist person that likes to go out and flip logs and find frogs and all the other sorts of critters that are out there.
That's kind of how we met, is that we were both nerds that like to go out there and flip logs and find frogs, so to speak, although we're actually looking for snakes. We found a lot of frogs on the way, though, and that's okay, because I like frogs, too.
Yeah, I recall what Greg and I's first meeting was during one of these, was it the Southeast Snake ID meetup groups? Is that right? Is that what they're called, Greg?
Southeast Texas Snake ID public events.
Yeah, we had one. They posted one. I've never been to one, and they posted one down at Brazos Bend State Park. And I was where I'm from originally, before moving and living in the Hill Country last over a decade. I grew up in Matagorda County, which is down towards the Gulf Coast in Texas, and only about 40 minutes from Brazos Bend. And that's where my son lives with his mother, his stepdad, and the rest of his family. So I'm down there pretty regularly, and my son is a herper, birder, naturalist too, although he would not admit to it at all. He's not bad. So we decided that we would go out and check one of these things out, and that's when I met Greg. I was in the middle of that big herp and bird year, and I thought I might kick it over there and add a couple ticks to the list. And I think that was in October, maybe 2016, 2017.
It was 16. And I think it was October. I think it was October because it was supposed to be cooler. And I thought it would be a good day to go out there and show up early and look for mud snakes. And I did that like 2 hours early, and it was like a wreck by the time I got to the parking lot where everybody was meeting, because I didn't find any mud snakes. And I just wandered around in like 98 degrees and 100% humidity for a couple of hours. And then I get over there and meet Romy in the parking lot. I met a lot of people in the parking lot. One of them was not Caleb Paul, because he's late to every event that he goes. But I did meet him later. but I met Romy, and we kind of hit it off and started talking about really it was the gear we were carrying that we started talking about. I think
Well, that's how I knew that I was in the right place when I saw this guy emerge from the swamp with a snake hook and probably that exact same hat you got on right
oh,
now.
it was actually it was that straw hat, which was the predecessor to this hat.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, yeah, so we met in a parking lot at Brazos Bend at a Southeast Texas Snake ID public event where basically herpers and just people that are interested about snake education come to see people who are, at least a little bit more professional about it, kind of wander around and see what we can find out there. And we found some stuff that day. As I recall, the first thing that happened was you showed me a picture of egret.
Sorry, that was my dog.
You showed me a picture of, I think, a great egret that had a glossy swamp snake in its mouth.
Oh, it was an ibis.
It was an ibis, okay. And I remembered the snake though.
White ibis, yeah.
And I identified the snake and taught you a bit about how to identify Leodites from Rigida, or Leodites rigida from Regina grami, which are the two. They look really similar there. So anyway, that's how we met, and then we went on to catch another glossy swamp snake that day, and several cottonmouths were seen, many alligators, and I'll let Romy tell the story about the the cottonmouth that we were going after in the brush when the incident happened. Cottonmouth.
Yeah, that was that was a fun one. So what was going on is you're meeting a bunch of new people. I didn't know any of these folks. Many of them already knew one another, but you're excited to be working with a group of competent field herpers, and you're hopeful that you're going to see a lot of cool critters and take some photographs and enjoy yourselves and your companionship. And we're hiking down the trail. It's pretty warm. And I think one of the first snakes that we found was this cottonmouth. It was striking, young cottonmouth, striking in appearance, not necessarily aggressive or anything like that. And we had it corralled off the trail, and I think we're working on getting some photographs. It was down on a nook of a tree or something, as I remember. And we're enjoying ourselves looking at the snakes, and I'm crouched down real low, booty almost touching the ground, and all of a sudden I feel this sharp, stinging sensation in my ass. And no joke, you're looking at a cottonmouth, you're photographing a cottonmouth, so when you get stung real bad on the butt by having your butt too low to the ground, the first thing you think is, I'm being bit by a cottonmouth. And I jump up and I'm back off, and I'm like, oh, it got me. And we look around and we see it's one of those big red wasps flying off that got through my very thin Columbia pants that we had in the field. But I for a brief moment, I thought that I had myself my first snake bite on the butt at the state park, and I was going to be tragically blacklisted out of this group forever after that.
In front of like 50 people.
Yeah, in front of a lot of folks, including the good thing about those trips is that you have a lot of folks that have never been around a snake before. They're there to experience it through the eyes of self-proclaimed experts or knowledgeable people, and they want to get comfortable. So it was not a really good way of presenting yourself. Being bitten, and which I wasn't, is not a good way of presenting yourself. But I remember that fondly, and I can still feel how I felt, thinking that I was knocked up by a doggone cottonmouth right behind me. No, we did find another cottonmouth not too far from there. I remember right afterwards, but it didn't tag me.
No, of the two of us, only one of us has actually been bitten by a cottonmouth. I'll tell that story maybe later, but yeah, I've been bit by a cottonmouth on August 20th of last year. Anyway, we've both been talking about. We met at this public Southeast Texas Snake ID event, and after that event was over, I invited Romy and his son Christian to go road cruising in nearby Damon, Texas with me, because the road cruising is supposed to be great out there. I don't know how good it actually is because we didn't find any snakes that night that we went riding around. But
I remember how you lured us in to ride with you that evening too.
How?
You said, hey, do you want to go see a glossy snake? Or no, yeah.
Made me sound like some kind of pervert with a van.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, we went road cruising around Damon, Texas, where I actually own a cottonmouth from Damon, Texas. But so that's why I knew that, it was a decent place to road cruise. The people that had caught that snake told me that all kind of snakes were out on the road. Anyway, we went road cruising out there and we didn't find anything. But we spent a couple of additional hours together just BSing and getting to know each other. And we've been friends ever since. We've gone on many additional adventures since then, some more successful than others. But all of them were good. We had fun on every one of them. And we witnessed a lot of wildlife together, seen some imperiled species together here. And so just to inform a little bit more, Romy's actually in South Austin and I am in Galveston, Texas. So we are at extreme social distance right now. The idea for this podcast that we want to do was that we would actually get together once a month or once every couple of months and actually be in the same studio and do the podcast together. But because of the COVID-19, quarantining and all of those things, that just really wasn't possible at this point. And we got all this additional time at home on our hands. And we just decided that now is kind of the best time to do it, regardless of whether or not can be in the same place or not. So that's kind of why this podcast, why now? So now that we're all introduced and we've talked a little bit about how we met, we did not have a script for this at all, but we did briefly discuss what we would kind of do. And I think each of us here is going to talk about a favorite birding / herping location that we like to go to in our areas or maybe even elsewhere. I don't know what he's going to talk about. So I think we can do that now. Anybody have any questions before we move on and start that?
There's a number of comments up there on your live stream there, Greg, but I can only see like 4 of them at a time, and it won't give me a way of threading back. Oh no, there it is. See thread, I guess.
I'm actually only seeing 2 comments.
Well, that's a tragedy.
Well, you're in control of the comments then, because I can only see 2. 3. I see a wave.
Well,
Lyle's account, Sandy Lyle saying hi, and then I see Sandy Lyles with the laugh emoji. That's all I see.
Well, I see that there's about 24 comments on your post, on your live feed on your page right now, but not on your.
Okay, let me look at that.
Not your watch party, but your live feed.
Right, I can.
And one of them, Greg, is from a friend of mine. I saw it swing by. Kylie is asking. I guess she was talking. When we're talking about flipping logs and finding frogs, she wanted to know if you found me underneath the log when you flipped it.
I got the comments now.
Okay, good. Well, hit them up. Anything good in there?
Okay, they're opening. Okay, see thread. Sorry, this is just kind of slow.
Well, while Greg's working on that, why don't I just start off by talking about one of my favorite places to go herp bird and all the things. And it's so hard to really pin it down. And it's incredibly difficult to take 2 different taxonomic groups that require different types of energies and periods of time to have the best opportunity to see maximum diversity or species of maximum interest. But I just don't think I could ever say that there's a better birding and herping region other than far west Texas and the Sky Islands and Desert Sea country, but that's not necessarily a specific site. So I would probably say Big Bend National Park is my favorite place to go birding and herping. But the herping there is a lot of don't touch anything, take a photograph and don't disturb it, because it's pretty critically important and enforced rigorously that you don't harass the wildlife, including picking it up and positioning it for photographs. So a lot of in situ photographs there. And the wonderful thing about that park is you have this incredible amount of diversity and habitats, and that's because of a critically important desert river system flowing and forming the boundary of the park. But then you also have one of those sky islands in the Chisos Mountains where you can find yourself up towards and over 7,000 feet in elevation, where opposed to the canyon country where the Rio's pouring through, and I don't know exactly how high that is, but I imagine it's around 2,000 feet. So big elevation gradient, big opportunity to see a difference in strictly desert type species, but also your riparian corridor species, and then of course your mountain species in some of those wooded, moist wooded habitats and ranges. And if I'm sharing a couple of my favorite finds there, I'm never not giddy and excited whenever I'm hiking up Pinnacles Trail in Big Bend National Park in the Chisos Mountains, and I see an alligator lizard scurrying across the trail or up the path ahead of me. And those are those big old, bulbous headed, kind of peach or tanny looking lizards that grow to be pretty sizable. And if they have a complete and intact tail, can have a really long tail. Strong biters. They're also found throughout the hill country. So I've held a few of them legally outside of the park. Strong biters, cool critters, beady-eyed, just a fantastic species to see. Also, the rock rattlesnakes out there are gorgeous, a little different than the ones we see in the hill country that are more of this caliche color and caliche base and gray coloration, banded pattern. Up there, it's a little bit more of that typical reddish and pinkish hues with this kind of granite-looking background. Bird life is amazing. Boot Canyon is probably one of my favorite places to bird in all of Texas, and that's again really high up in the Chisos Mountains. And I've seen some pretty excellent birds up there. It's really good for the blue-throated hummingbird, which is a huge hummingbird. And then you also are going up there because this is the only place in the United States where you can see a warbler called the Colima warbler, which breeds in the Chisos Mountains. And then last year I had a really exciting find. I didn't discover it, but there was a male slate-throated redstart, which is related to the painted redstarts. Painted redstarts are there every spring. They're breeders up there in a high elevation. But the slate-throated redstart is a really pretty gem of a bird that shows up occasionally in the high elevation canyons of the Sky Islands of West Texas and provide a real treat. I could talk about this area all day, but I'm going to pass the baton back over to Greg, see if there's any questions, let you hit some of your favorite places, your favorite place to bird and herp, and then maybe we can bounce into some more questions after that.
Okay, so I got my comment stream working now, and I saw that my sister-in-law Kimberly asked if there were, it said when we first started learning about COVID-19 that it was said to have been linked to a snake, and she wanted to know if there was anything definitive on that. And actually, no, there has not been. It's thought that it actually, nobody knows yet. It's thought that it came from a bat or a pangolin, actually, and with maybe another host, an intermediary host animal in there, which I suppose could have been a snake. But I really don't think so. It came from a bat or pangolin, actually. See, that was happening to me a minute ago. Anyway, there's not a definitive answer on that right now, but I think the main suspect actually is the pangolin right now, the scaled anteater, which is something that is really popular in traditional Chinese medicine. Is the scales of the pangolin. They're actually highly endangered as well. So maybe people have quit messing with pangolins now. I guess maybe a silver lining to that. But I don't know. So that was one question that was there. There was a couple of more questions that weren't just general comments that I think I wanted to talk about.
Greg, I got one that was I've got one that I'll jump on. Kathy Kelly asks, are you allowed to carry snake equipment into Big Bend National Park? That's a really good question. And I would say that the answer is resoundingly, you can do whatever you want. But you're going to get yourself into some sort of trouble if you show that to anybody. I once carried with my son, who had gotten a metal detector for his birthday, and we took a trip to Big Bend, and we didn't have any intentions of using that thing, but it was displayed in our campground, and we had a nice stern talking to about locking that thing up and don't let any of the rangers see that I had that. And I would assume that would go to snake equipment also, although I always carry snake equipment in my snake collecting or snake, bagging systems or whatever. I'm always ready to pick up a dead on the road and preserve it ready for the museum, not in Big Bend. I just don't display the stuff, because they're very sensitive. The park is there for our enjoyment, but it is for our passive enjoyment, unless you are, permitted scientifically or otherwise. I wouldn't even indicate that you are there with any sort of intentions that run afoul of the spirit of what the park is for. So the answer is, you can do whatever you want, but you better lock that stuff up and don't display it. Another real quick story I have is I had a deer antler that from a spike whitetail buck that I'd found on a property here in the hill country that I collected as a token for a conservation easement project I worked on. And I carried that on my dashboard, and it was only big as one of my fingers. And I got a warning citation from a ranger that if I had collected that from the park, that I was to return that wherever I found it, regardless of where I found it, immediately upon finding that note. And if that was indeed not found in the park, that I needed to hide it somewhere so that a ranger doesn't see it again during my entire trip. They're pretty strict out there.
Yeah, I can add to that a little bit. I was in Bastrop State Park with my friend Caleb Paul. We were up there during my 2017 Herps Big Year, and we weren't collecting or catching anything. And we had collection gear in the vehicle because we had been going to other public sites and, road cruising. And we did get questioned and searched. Or I don't think we actually got searched at that point, but we did get questioned about that collection gear. Texas is pretty strict about it. And it seems like the further west you go in Texas, the more intense the scrutiny is on collecting herps. They really are not into letting people do it out in West Texas unless they are strictly following the regulations, in which a lot of people don't realize that there are actually a lot of regulations surrounding that we have to know to legally do what we do when we catch snakes but road cruising. You can't just run up and grab a snake off the pavement because you see it there. That's not legal, especially not at night. You have to be wearing a reflective vest. That snake has to be on the unimproved shoulder of the road.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to impede the progress of that animal on the roadway. There are all kinds of regulations that go with this that we have to know to stay legal. And just as an addendum to, are you allowed to carry gear in state parks? The answer is, I guess you can have anything you want in your car to an extent, but to openly display those tools is just going to invite scrutiny. And I would encourage anyone to just either leave that stuff at home when you go into a state park if possible. But people like Romy and I that work on scientific collection permits and things, and that are just herpers, we are curious about these animals. We want to catch them and examine them. We have snake collecting gear in our vehicles almost at all times. So, we're probably open to a lot more scrutiny than most people would be. But I do, 100% follow the laws whenever I go to a place, at least as much. Maybe I have broken a law out of ignorance, but I generally try to follow guidelines.
Which breaking the law out of ignorance, that doesn't get you a get out of jail free ticket. And I'll also mention that working out in West Texas and legally collecting dead snakes off of roads to preserve at UT or A&M or any of the other university museums in Texas, and especially if I have a live animal that I've collected for a project, I won't even take a shortcut through Big Bend National Park, just driving through the road there. I'm going to take the long route home, because if I'm pulled over, and even if I can justify that I collected this outside the park, it's going to be a rigmarole, and I'm probably going to end with a ticket and make my case to a judge or something later. And that's so, there's a lot of different layers of scrutiny working within the national park system when all you have is a general Texas Parks and Wildlife Department scientific collections permit or permission to collect off of some of the state lands under your hunting permits.
Okay, so Romy's talked about some of his favorite territory to herp and birding. I'm going to talk about a little bit of mine. So one of the places when I really got back into herping again around 2014, I had previously been a herper, but I took a few years off. And in 2014, I started herping a place called Bay Street Park in Texas City. Many people that are from this area are going to be familiar with that. You can go there in the daytime and never see a snake. But you go there at night, it's a whole different ball game. There are the place is literally crawling with snakes. I found dead hognose snakes in the area, but never actually seen a live one. There are all but one species of Nerodia in Southeast Texas can be found in this park, and a lot of them. Particularly diamondback water snakes, which is one of my favorite snakes, are really common there. There are also salt marsh snakes there. There are Mississippi green water snakes there, plain-bellied water snakes. There are, of course, cottonmouths there as well, and there are western diamondback rattlesnakes in that park. My friend Heath Allred and I have done a lot of herping there. Biggest bullfrogs I've ever seen were caught there, and we see some small alligators in the smaller water holes there that are, it's nice to go view them at night. You can catch them with the eye shine with your flashlight, and the park is a great place to bird as well. I was a herper long before I was a birder, and my fiance Laura, introduced me to casual birding. Just, as we were driving around looking for snakes, we would also look at birds. And then I got to be a lot more of a birder because Romy let me know that during the wintertime, when you can't find any snakes, there's always something to look at if you're a birder, because there's winter birding. So I started birding, and Bay Street Park's really a great place. There's you can see all manner of birds there. There's a nice pond with a wooded island in the middle of it that you can look across into there and see your spring and fall warblers there. There are many water birds to be seen there, ducks, pelicans, both variety, brown and white pelicans can be seen there depending on time of year. All the herons and egrets are in the area. It's a great place to you can get there in the evening and bird through your evening, and then as soon as the sun goes down, there are snakes and frogs everywhere in that park. And there's your smaller fossorial snakes there too, like the rough earth snakes and DK's brown snakes. There are your fossorial small frogs, like the eastern narrowmouth toad can be found there. Anyway, there's a whole big handful. I think I totaled up like 31 species of herps that you can actually find in that small park. Well, it's not that small. It's actually a pretty lengthy park. And then on its border, there's actually a hummingbird park, which is a great place to bird for warblers, hummingbirds. And then kind of behind the pavilion area there's actually some boards you can flip, and that's where you'll find those fossorial snakes. So I've done a lot of herping in Bay Street Park. And another great birding location is almost connected to Bay Street Park, which is the Texas City Dike. You can see all of your different gull species there. Lots of, and then the right time of year, late winter, early spring, all of the grebes are going to be, horn grebes, eared grebes, pied-billed grebes, all going to be seen there. I've seen a brown booby there, and not the kind of booby most of you are thinking about. An actual pelagic bird called a booby. And anyway, I've seen all kinds of birds out there at Texas City Dike. I've enjoyed a lot of birding there with my good friend Kyle O'Haver, who I think might be watching now, and with Richard Liebler and my friend Dennis Cook. We have gone out there and birded a lot. That is just a great area for herping and birding. You can also see sea turtles from the Texas City Dike. I've never been lucky enough to see one from there, but Carrie Howard, who might be watching now, has seen at least green sea turtles from there, and I think Kemp Ridleys can also be observed from there. And I guess if you got really really lucky, people have seen leatherbacks in Galveston County. I never have. All I've ever seen is greens, just a couple of them too. So anyway, that's kind of one of my favorite local locations. I got more of them, but I'm not gonna. I would take a lot of time if I wanted to visit every spot that I herped and birded in Galveston County. So anybody has any questions about those, about that, I'd be happy to answer. Or Romy could answer some questions now too.
We got, I was going to say maybe on a future podcast, maybe the topic would be, to breaking that out to top 5 favorite herping spots with a little brief introduction or something like that. Because just like you, man, I got about a dozen that are running through my head like, oh, this would be a good one. If I put these up and did a pros and cons, does it rank against Big Bend? Or, am I biased to West Texas and Greg to East Texas? There's all sorts of, if we were guided to say, hey, I want you to pick one place from each quadrant of the state, that would probably be a fun game to play too.
Probably so.
Although I would quickly forget the Panhandle. There's just nothing going on up there.
Hey, there's Ambystoma up there. And
I know. I'm probably ticking some folks off. Where else are you going to see northern shrike in Texas? I mean,
yeah, and you're nowhere else except the far northern part of Texas.
Or a goodly number of mountain bluebirds or things like that. I'm not seeing any new questions, but I did see Richard say that Big Bend rules, and he got his lifer western diamondback and black-tailed rattlesnakes there, and has seen the red starts at that site. So I mean, another person sort of validating Big Bend is one of the best places to be, although maybe not the greatest for herping. You see a lot of cool stuff there. It's good for eye natting.
What we did see a lot of there when we went were the lizard diversity out there is great compared to other places in the state. I was expecting to see a lot of snakes, but we actually didn't see. I think we saw one dead snake the entire time we were in Rio Grande Village. But we saw lots. It was like over the course of a couple of days in that general area of Texas, we saw like 28 species of lizards out there. So that's where the real herps diversity is out there, is in the lizards. But there's also all kinds of snakes out there in West Texas.
Yeah, you just have to be lucky to find them when they're active. My first trip, that trip with my family, and when I had Christian, we were so excited. It was our first trip, our first extended period of time to spend in Big Bend. I'd been once for just a quick little in and out type thing in college. And I remember driving there and was so excited about the herp diversity. You open up Dixon's Texas Snakes and you're like, oh my gosh, everything's out there. We drove all those hundreds of miles. We spent a week in the park, and we're actively looking around, driving around, looking for road cruise snakes and stuff. And I literally walked away from that trip with one snake observation after spending a week out there with my family of a checkered garter snake.
You could have got that in your backyard.
The same snake that I'd seen last in my own backyard before leaving Austin. That was like in 2011 or 2012. I can't remember which year, but that was a big letdown. But I have not, any snake's a great snake. But that place has never let me down, really, in any significant way. There's always something amazing to see out there in that country.
So, we were going to open up to questions after this, but honestly, it doesn't seem to be a lot of questions. So I think that just off the cuff, thinking of maybe something else that we can talk about. It was on the tip of my tongue. I just had it, and now I lost it. I can talk about.
Well, Clyde Longwell's asking, or he's not asking a question, but he's pointing out that he likes to go herping over in Comstock in the Sanderson area. There's also some pretty decent birds that can be seen out there, particularly if you've got hummingbird feeders up year round.
Yeah, well, that's true.
That's where we, when we took our trip last or the year before last year in April to go do that run when you were doing your big year. 2017.
April 2017.
Man, that's been a couple of years then.
Yeah.
We stayed and we ended up staying with our good friend Lee Hoy out there at his place when he was still living in Sanderson. And then we went road cruising. We spent a whole day herping together up near Barnhart. But he lived in Sanderson and took us to a couple of his honey holes that he had found or developed. And I haven't really followed up on those sites again since then. But every time I drive by, I remember, that little junked out, abandoned shanty on the side of the road, and finding horned lizards and tantilla and all sorts of things out there. I think we even got a lifer together on that trip.
We did. It was Tantilla Hobart Smith eye.
That's right.
It was flipped in a vacant lot in Sanderson with Lee. In this junk shanty lot in the middle of town, and you find him.
Yeah, that was over in Comstock. Yeah.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. Sanderson. It was back away from Sanderson. I remember we were traveling that way. I can't remember where we did that. I guess we were taking the long way back up to Barnhart or something.
We ended up in the Ozona area.
Yeah, that's what it was. And then Barnhart.
Barnhart was close by. We ended up there too. But yeah, that was a great herping trip. We went down the infamous Hoggassagua Road, which I will not disclose the county road which that is, because Nathan Raines would.
You probably just saved some friendships there by shutting it down.
I can tell you three people that would absolutely murder me for giving away that county road, which would be Willie, Ben, and Nathan. They would not be happy about that. But I actually haven't found a hognose snake or a Massasauga at the site. I've been there 3 times now, and I found some other stuff though. Green toad, some other goods, like Hypsiclena night snakes were found there, and of course Western diamondbacks, plenty of those. And we found the shed skin of a milk snake after we flipped.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
20-foot tall pile of railroad ties to find one small Western diamondback.
I recall there was a different trip, one that we didn't do together. I'd gone out with some friends, and we found my lifer line snake, lined. I've never seen one of those. That was a pretty cool find. And then if you recall, Greg, one of the other memorable events from that trip that you, I, and Lee took was the spot-tailed earless lizard that ran right in front of us. And
I recall.
And then ran over.
Yeah.
It ran out in front of the tire.
Yeah, that endangered species or threat. Is it threatened?
Near threatened or whatever it is.
There ain't many of them. Well, there's one less.
Its kamikaze lifestyle led to it being deposited at the University of Texas Natural History Museum. So,
but you know what the important part of that was? That it was still alive when we approached it on the road. And I was able to check that one off the list, and then peacefully euthanize it.
Not the circumstances that you want to see your
it's not. It's not. But rules are rules, and the rules were that the animal had to be alive, and that animal was alive.
Well, and it ended up being useful too, because my friend Travis, who oversees that naturally, I think he had a project where he's actually trying to procure some of the genetics associated with that species for all this work they're doing to figure out how what the status really is of the two species, the Edwards Plateau species versus the South Texas species. And so there was a contribution to make. If it was just a couple of old oil field workers out there mowing down spot-tailed earless lizards, surely that wouldn't have happened. It still would have been ran over, but it wouldn't have been collected and deposited. So we made the lemonade out of the lemons that day.
That's how we do it that day anyway. So I kind of remembered what it was that I wanted to talk about. I said that the lizard diversity was high out there, but we didn't see a lot of snakes. But it was mainly a consequence of us just being a little bit too early in April, because we went back for snake days to the same general area and hit every county in the Trans-Pecos and pretty much cleaned up on snakes. We saw a lot of snakes. I went out to Black Gap on a solo run when you were guiding those people that one day, and I couldn't go 200 feet without road cruising a snake. I actually saw the first black-tailed rattlesnakes I've ever seen in Texas out there at Black Gap. and I saw my lifer variable ground snake out there, a really beautiful one.
Mm-hmm.
Transpecus rat snakes, lots of Transpecus rat snakes out there. Man, I can't even remember what all I saw out there. I got a record of it somewhere, but there's a lot of snake diversity and lizard diversity out there in the Transpecos, and we saw a lot of it.
That points out just those the same sort of circumstances that you see anywhere, is that, you know, some places that will be dead on a particular day, weekend, or month, or whatever. At some point, there will be a flip switched, and you can just find more diversity and more abundance than you've ever observed. But the big thing was that we had, when Greg and I went out on that trip a couple of years ago, it was early April, and you know, it's spring. There had been some snake activity reported. We were excited to get out there. The conditions were ideal the first night that we arrived. We were actually really surprised to not have found anything, especially on Black Gap Road that evening. We ended up staying the night there, and just not finding anything. And then the next day having some good lizard diversity. But then a norther came in and knocked the temperatures down pretty significantly for the next day, and kind of killed all chances of really seeing much movement and activity. You know, looking for snakes, especially through the road cruising. And so we you know, transitioned and started looking for those diurnal basking lizards that are out during the hottest part of the day, trying to soak up some of that sun. And that's when we started kicking some tail.
So I got a couple more questions that have popped up. Trace Darnell, which is actually my second cousin, he's asking what the full name of my podcast is on YouTube. So just to clarify, this podcast that we're starting up right now is not, I actually do my own podcast too, and it's called the Wild Wild West End, which is the West-End, the Wild Wild West-End on YouTube. I have my own YouTube channel. There's 4 episodes there right now. I'm about halfway done working on the 5th episode, which is the most expansive one that I've done so far. But I got some good work that I've done there, I think. Some people have liked it. It's relatively low key right now. Not a lot of people know about it or are listening to it yet. And then my sister-in-law has commented here. Kimberly Holiday Hall has commented that one place constantly asking for snake identification is the local Nextdoor app. You would likely save the life of many harmless snakes. Now I can address that. I actually spent some time on the Nextdoor app, and I work in pretty much full time in one snake ID group online. And I have over the years worked in several others. Now, what you find more on Nextdoor app than anything are people who want to ask you what the ID on a snake is. And then when you give them the ID on the snake, they will quickly disagree with you and say it's a cottonmouth, a copperhead, some kind of a venomous snake. And no matter what you do, they're going to kill that snake. That snake's usually dead by the time they post the picture. So I got away from using the Nextdoor app because I ended up in nothing but arguments with people on it. And they actually did not want my expert advice on snake ID. They just wanted, I'm going to try to think of a way to phrase this, to display their trophy, which is also a thing you see on Facebook a lot. When people kill snakes and put up pictures of the snakes, it's more of a trophy display than it is needing or wanting an actual ID. Those things do come in snake ID groups. Now, I do a lot of work in Southeast Texas snake ID, both ID and snakes up front from photographs. And then I also used to work in a background group to Southeast Texas snake ID, where I consulted with other experts on tough IDs and actually got back to people on the IDs of those snakes. So another person that's actually in this watching right now that did a lot of that with me is Sandy Lyles. She's a pretty top-notch snake ID person, and she runs, I think it's, I'm going to fail to remember which ID group that she runs now, but she has her own ID group. I think it's Wild Snake ID or something to that effect. But I worked with Sandy a lot and think a lot of her. She's a good snake ID person. Anyway, Nextdoor is a place that generally does not like snake experts to come on there and comment. So while I really appreciate the idea that I might save the life of some snakes on there, I think focusing on where I work in Southeast Texas Snake ID is probably the best bet for me. We actually have rules against people, arguing and disagreeing with the people that are on the administrative staff there helping to ID snakes. And we will control that situation by turning off commenting. Once we positively ID a snake, there's pretty much nothing else to say about it. And at that point, we just kind of stop things. So that's not to be like a dictatorship. That's just the way it is. If we don't do that, people will continue to comment on those threads and keep boosting them to the top, and we'll miss IDs we could have made. So we have a controlled situation there. We do not have a controlled situation on Nextdoor. So anyway, just to address those questions real quick, see if I see any more. I see some comments, but I don't really see too many more questions on there, at least serious ones. So I don't know. Where does that put us, Romy?
Well, I think that puts us at probably a natural place to start to wind this first effort down.
I think you're right. Any idea how long we've been going?
Well, it's 7:47.
Okay. Well, right around, we kind of wanted to shoot for around an hour, and we're about there. So this was not a very organized attempt at this, but I think, we did what we wanted to do, and we got on here and we told some stories, and we talked about some places we like to go, and generally interacted, and which is some more human interaction than I've had in weeks. So I've enjoyed it, and I hope everybody that watched has enjoyed it as well. I think Facebook automatically records these things, so anybody that wants can go back later and watch it, and tell us how we did. Tell us what you want to see us talk about in the future, and any final words there, Romy?
I think it's important to remember that anytime that we jump onto the comment thread and see something that sparks a little bit of a tangent, that you're going to probably get even more animation and unscripted goodness. So we hope to be pretty interactive with the folks that enjoy this live, and then we'll also come back and take a look at any comments after it all posts, and take some of those and maybe utilize them as ideas moving forward. Greg, there is one thing I wanted to add, that folks certainly should hit your podcast up, the Wild Wild West Inn. I think that you got something good going on there. And I'm going to make just a quick plug that although I haven't been operating my blog in a couple of years, which is why this post is called The Modern Texas Naturalist Meets the Wild Wild West End live stream, I'm going to work with one of my friends, Kylie, to get that website back up and running and start adding some content. But before I do, there's a YouTube page for that old blog of mine called Modern Texas Naturalist. And it, I haven't been active in there in a while, but I'll start picking it up. And I also have a YouTube channel for myself where I usually, one's more about wildlife and Texas-centric stuff, and the other one's just about adventure trips, going hiking, backpacking, fishing. But also I've posted a couple of herp videos up on that one. So under my name, Romy Swanson on YouTube, you can find that channel. There's a couple of cool videos in there. And then I'll get that the old blog back up and running. I still own the website, www.moderntexasnaturalist.com. And hopefully within the next month or so, I'm starting to add some of that content. And so thanks for letting me just kind of plug that. It's been a long time coming, and this will probably provide me the having an accountability partnership with not just Greg, but everybody that's sitting out here in this box. Maybe we'll strike a chord on me to get that done.
Well, I appreciate that. I've worked hard on my podcast, and I'm glad that at least a few people like it. And I think it'll gain steam as I do more and pick up more listeners. I really enjoyed your blog when you were active with it. So I would love to see that happen again for sure, because I really enjoyed your blog. And I've also got a blog. It doesn't have I don't have my own website. It's on a Wix page. There's actually a link to that in my Facebook profile. So anybody that wants, we've talked about some things that are covered in way more detail in that blog. So if anybody wants to check my blog out, feel free. I'm going to expand on lots of that's in there in my podcast. So with that, this has been a hitherto unnamed podcast with Romy Swanson and Greg Hall. I hope you all enjoyed. And until next time, sign on.
All right. Keep the comments coming, guys. Give us some ideas. What's interesting? Otherwise, you're just going to get two dudes rambling on.
Yeah.
See you guys.
All right. Have a good
Bye,
night.
Greg.
Bye.
Have a good
Later
night,
on.
bud. Bye.